Welcome to Context. Today on the program, revolutions, rebellions, insurrections happening across the globe. Countless scenes of brave men and women protesting by the millions, standing together in waves of solidarity. Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Algeria, and Egypt. The protest movements of the Middle East are a clarion call to governments and the rest of the world that the people are fed up with corruption, unemployment, and all may be quashed by the old order of the political hardline elite. But as history proves, the people will only rise up again. Today on Context, voices from the Middle East crying out for change are being heard here in Canada. Carolyn Faraj is CNN Vice President and Editor-in-Chief of the Arabic Services. She is based in Dubai and joined CNN during a time of great regional upheaval, from the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq and the Arabic Spring to the rise of Islamist militant group ISIS. She's held senior roles as correspondent, talk show host, and reporter. Carolyn, thank you for joining us. It's time to explain the chaos and uprisings of Arab Spring turning into Arab Autumn. What do you understand is happening?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Indeed, it started with the so-called Arab Spring in 2011, but the call was actually for political reforms. However, now, as you can see now in the streets, people are starting to go back to the streets in the Arab world, but the request is different. They're all asking for economic reforms. They need a piece of bread to go back home, to have the chance to work. They have the chance to get married, to live a decent life.
All right, they want stability back. Why do we here in Canada need to care about instability in the Middle East? It's all over the newscasts. Why does it matter to us?
It's very important because when there's instability and there's a chaos and problem in one country, that doesn't mean that you can contain the country and stop it from expanding. The chaos, it's becoming like cancer, spreading all over the place. So people, when they are frustrated, they don't have freedom, they don't have democracy, freedom of expression, and above all, ability to work and live a decent life, they will start looking into options. And the options, it's easy sometimes for those who are feeling lost, if you like, and there's no hope for them, to be an easy target for those who are claiming that they are talking in the name of God, which is the extremism. And this is how they become extremists. And of course, as an extremist, you have to obey your leader. And the leader would immediately tell them, go and attack other countries because they're not Muslims. And that is why not only Canada, the whole world should be really careful that these people, they need to contain them. They need to help them to live a decent life.
Okay, so peace is essential, but Syria's war is almost 9 years. Is there any end in sight?
Well, of course, I need to be always optimistic, and I should tell you, yes, there is hope and there's a chance. It's all in the hands of the stakeholders, if you like, those who are basically on the land that doesn't belong to them, including also the regime who is not really acting as a regime. And of course, the people already from the beginning went to the streets because of them. So it is becoming now, who's the scapegoat and everything is basically the people in the streets. Now, what's happening is in Syria, there are some signs that can tell us that people, there is hope for them to go back, and there is some kind of a so-called peace. But between you and me, the thing is not only having now peace and stop the war, it's rebuilding the country, and that is the main challenge. This challenge, it's not a challenge only for Syria or any other country that is suffering from war. It is a challenge for the whole globe, including Canada, because they need to make sure that they're stable, and that would actually take us to the same question that we just answered before, which basically it will spread the chaos and terrorism, and that will be a danger and a threat.
Is Jordan considered a peacemaker in this kind of tinderbox? Jordan.
Well, as you know, that I'm originally from Jordan, and I was living in Jordan for quite some time, but I left the country since '99, and I've been working in different countries, including now in the UAE for 18 years. Jordan is a peacemaker and a peacekeeper at the same time. Don't forget the borders that they have with Israel. It's basically the length is the largest, and also at the same time they have borders with other unstable countries like Iraq. They have also like Syria, and Saudi is not also 100% stable, as you know. So it is the country is surrounded by all these unstable measures and countries. In addition to this, the refugees, as you know, Jordan is hosting the highest number of refugees. But at the same time, all refugees, including Jordanians, are sharing the water, the land, and everything. And you know that as far as I know, and recently I talked to the leadership in Jordan, they told us that 10% of all the promises from the whole world to support the refugees on the land, on the Jordanian land, was only delivered. So imagine 10%, and Jordan is taking 90%, while Jordan is having lots of issues with debt, more than $32 billion, the debts in Jordan. So it is really tough. And that is actually another challenge for the regime, to make sure that they have to basically keep the peace that they signed between them and Israel.
All right. And it is the generation that's coming up, that's trying to get back into school, that's trying to go on with their university and their educations. They are going to be the ones that suffer the most, right?
Exactly. You know, according to the United Nations, 70% of the population in the Arab world are under the age of 30. So you can imagine, when you have this huge number of young people, they all are looking for hope. And at the same time, you have to look to the other side of the story, which they are so talented. They are very much into technology. They are into culture, into creativity, innovation. So they need a chance to reflect their creativity and reflect their capabilities as human beings on this earth.
All right. Carolyn Farage, Vice President of Arabic Services for CNN, thank you for your insight. Well, Iraq and Iran, two ancient lands with years of animosity, war, grievances, and hostilities between them. Both countries are once again in conflict. Sama Waham is an Iraqi filmmaker, and Samra Khalili, an Iranian expat. Both live in Canada. Sama and Samra, thank you both for being here. I think it's terrific. This is Canada, where we can put two countries that are warring back home together here. Sama, tell us what is going on right now in your homeland.
The latest uprising and protest in Iraq that started on October 1st of this year, a few weeks ago, thousands of Iraqis went down to Tahrir Square, mainly in Baghdad, and also followed by a number of major Iraqi cities, and peaceful, unarmed protesters who were demanding basic public services, who were protesting against corruption and the lack of these services, unemployment, the extent of everything that's been going on. And they were met with extreme violence by
deaths again.
By a number of deaths, significant number of deaths that has risen now to approximately 500 deaths in all of Iraq, as well as, depending on the sources, of course, you rely on this. These are the reported numbers, and 20,000 injuries, significant number of which is life-threatening.
Just since October alone. Correct. Okay. Samra, Iran. Hundreds have been killed by government forces recently. You still have family there. What are the conditions they're living with?
The conditions are horrible. I mean, half of the Iranian population lives in poverty, right? And gas prices are up by more than 50%. Eggs alone, due to inflation, it's 40% higher now. And a lot of employees are not even being paid right now. It's just the economy is crippled in Iran, and people had enough. And the president promised to deal with the economy and make things better, but he hasn't kept his promise. Things just gone worse, and people are starving. People had enough.
And so the protests this time around are very different, and religion isn't as much a play as is the economy and corruption and just issues of basic justice. Is that right for both of these countries?
Precisely.
They just want human rights, basic human rights.
What do you think Canadians should do? What is the purpose of saying, do not forget these stories? Because this has not been understood well in the media. Sama?
When the protests first started, most media and officials, it was met with unfortunate international silence. And a number of Iraqi Canadian activists were in touch with a few officials, were in touch with media, and we've moved, fortunately, and we're very grateful for that, from expressing concern about the number of deaths and the violence and the extent of violence that these unarmed protesters are being treated with, to condemning. And we're hoping to move past that now, because Canada is a country that's always promoted and defended human rights. And at the very least, a handful of human rights are being violated daily and recorded daily as well. And you can find evidence videos of that. The right to life is being violated on by the hour, everyday basis, and the right to peaceful protests, and every government's responsibility is not only to provide them with the chance to do that, but to protect them and give them a safe atmosphere to be able to express their opinions.
I'm so encouraged that we have two different countries with centuries of war between you. On set, it's the Canadian way. Samra, what will it take for peace? What will it take?
I personally believe the government needs to be overthrown in Iran. I think the Iranian people need a voice, the right to vote without corruption, without fraud, be able to believe what they want to believe, in even religion perspective, right? And they just want to be able to work to provide for their families the same basic things that we all humans have in common and want. And when that's taken away from you, it's very hard, right? When you're treated not like a human being and your rights are completely stripped away from you.
All right, well, both of you, thank you for Sama Waham and Samra Khalili. Thank you for giving Canadians the chance to see the need for change through both of your eyes. Okay, to Lebanon now, where protesters have taken to the streets since mid-October, calling out corruption in the government and a dire economic crisis. Aya Majoub is a researcher at Human Rights Watch. She joins me now from Beirut. Aya, what is it like in Lebanon with the protests?
I mean, it's both a very optimistic and hopeful time, but also a time of deep crisis. So the protests started on the 17th of October in response to the government announcing a slew of new taxes, including on WhatsApp, on gasoline, and on tobacco. And they introduced these taxes at a time when the economy was already doing badly and where average Lebanese families were really struggling to make ends meet. So the imposition of these new taxes at that time just demonstrated how out of touch politicians were with the concerns of ordinary citizens.
Okay, you mentioned taxes even on WhatsApp and more on gas. So how are the citizens impacted in this economic crisis?
First, it has caused small and medium businesses to really struggle, and many of them are closing. Some businesses are also starting to pay half salaries to their employees, if they pay them at all. And then businesses that used to pay their employees in dollars are now paying them in Lebanese liras or Lebanese pounds, whose unofficial value has decreased about 40% since the beginning of October. So people have seen a huge reduction in their purchasing power.
And it's so bad, there are even reports of suicides.
We've noted at least 3 suicides that have been reported in the media in the past couple of weeks linked to the economic crisis. In one case, a father said that he was unable to give his daughter 1,000 Lebanese liras, which is the equivalent of 66 cents, when she requested it. And when he couldn't give her that money, he decided to end his life. And we saw 2 similar cases after that. But these suicides show just how desperate the economic situation in Lebanon is, and how people see that, how helpless people feel regarding the prospects for their economic situation. So it's an issue that we are extremely concerned about.
And now there's a medical crisis. Can this get even possibly worse?
We released a report yesterday on the huge crisis facing the medical sector in Lebanon. Medical supply importers have told us that they haven't been able to bring in any vital medical supplies into the country since September. What this means is that we're starting to run out of blood bags, we're starting to run out of dialysis filters, we're starting to run out of heart stents and bone screws. So they're warning that before the end of the year, we might start seeing people dying in hospitals because doctors aren't able to provide life-saving surgery. So the situation is pretty dire. And unfortunately, instead of addressing the very real economic concerns facing the Lebanese population today, the politicians are still horse trading and trying to do backroom deals to figure out who's going to be in the next government. Further demonstrating just how out of touch they are with the concerns of ordinary citizens and further fueling the protest movement.
I am Ajoub from Human Rights Watch there in Lebanon. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a spark in you and a spark in me, so get up, let's take the lead.
Well, despite the protests and unrest, there is peace in some regions of the Middle East, and even on the front lines, bringing food, clothing, shelter, and medicine to help those affected by war to rebuild from the ground up. That's what Preemptive Love Coalition does. Its founder and CEO, Jeremy Courtney, joins me now from Houston. Jeremy, wow, you actually moved to Iraq during the war there. Why did you decide to go into a war zone?
We were naive enough to actually think that there might be another way. There might be a better way. So kind of in the aftermath of September 11th, and once the Iraq war was reaching its peak, we actually moved in youthfully, naively, thinking that there might be a better way to go about some of this work and some of what was going on.
Okay, so your focus is on Iraq and Syria, who are trying to move forward after years of ISIS control. What do people in these countries need most?
Oh, goodness. They need hope, perhaps, as much as anything. But how do we give hope? Hope largely consists of people believing that they have the agency to make their world better. And so we engage in frontlines relief and then long-term job development. And we do it all in the spirit of peacemaking, in the spirit of reconciliation, trying to help people heal the past and all the things that are tearing us apart. And when people see that their actions matter, when they see that people will show up for them in their time of need, when they see that they actually have the ability to rebuild after conflict and put food on their table, I think that helps everyone's aspirations rise and believe that we can actually shape the world around us. And I think a lot of the despair that we see in the Middle East is largely predicated on a miscarriage of hope. People don't believe that their actions can actually affect change, and we're working to.
So what do you see that you're doing that's working?
Well, I think a lot of it consists in the fact that we take a comprehensive approach. So we treat violence like a disease. It spreads like a disease. And so we are applying principles that we've all learned for how to stop the spread of a disease. That's how we stop the spread of violence. That's how we work to end war. So we show up fast on the front lines with relief. We help get people the food and water and medicine they need in times of conflict. And that actually not only fills bellies, not only helps people survive the night, but it stops violence from spreading from one community to another. And then one of the other things that we've learned by treating viruses is we've learned that you've got to protect the vulnerable, and jobs, economic development is one of the best ways, one of the best proven ways that we can protect vulnerable people. So we do long-term job creation, and we help people start their businesses so that they have the agency, they have the money in their hands to rebuild their communities.
What an encouraging story. Just picking up, crossing into a foreign country and saying we can help make peace. Jeremy Courtney from the Preemptive Love Coalition. Thank you. Your information, how to learn more about your team is all up there on our website at Context. Thank you for joining us, Jeremy.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
Just ahead, a Sudanese Canadian who spent 3 horrific years in a refugee camp now helps other refugees in the long and difficult process of settling here in Canada. And a pastor who works throughout the Middle East shares stories of hope and healing in some of the Middle East's war-torn countries. Well, according to the United Nations, there are 70.8 million people who've been forcibly displaced from their homes due to conflict worldwide. Last year, 28,000 refugees were admitted into Canada. And Moses Mawini is a former refugee from Sudan who now works to settle refugees into Canada. Context producer Faten Al-Faraj has the story.
Working with refugees reminds me of something that God was doing. And it was like He was preparing me to be working with refugees down the road. I came to Canada in 1992. I was forced to flee my country, Sudan, because of conflict. So I became a refugee and lived in a refugee camp in Uganda for 3 years. The 3 years were the most difficult time in my life. After 3 years, I got an opportunity to resettle in Canada. I work with an organization called Mennonite Central Committee. We are what is called a sponsorship agreement holder. We have an agreement with the government of Canada through the Ministry of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada to help with the sponsorship of refugees from overseas, to help with the settlement of those refugees. I know we have this as a plan. Okay, newcomers have to integrate into the community after an X number of months. But no, we will have lost our call to respond to the needs of newcomers if we are so driven by a focus on certain outcomes. What we need to do is to live our calling in a way that communicates our love for these newcomers, and then we leave the outcome in the hands of God.
Good, how are you?
So as you work with them, you'll have to be sensitive to that reality. You'll have to be patient. You'll have to know that there is so much that you don't know about these people, that the strategic planning that we in the West love in terms of outcomes may be something that you just put aside and focus on building relationship and friendship with these newcomers, and then over time begin to see how that unfolds. And it is through that long process that the integration of the newcomers into our society begins to happen. Of course, it is heavy. The need is so huge. There are close to 26 million refugees in the world, and we really don't have the capacity, not as an organization, even as a country, to be able to be a practical solution. But it is one family at a time, and that is where we focus our energy and our strength.
Protests break out across Iraq, Iran, and Lebanon as remnants of the Arab Spring turn to an Arab autumn. Turkey launches a military operation in Syria just as the country starts to pick up the pieces after years of ISIS control. But there is hope in the Middle East. Pastor Nizar Shaheen sees that with his ministry, Light for All Nations. Nizar, thank you for being with us. You usually, I said there's hope, but you would normally be in Syria right now with Christmas gifts. What's on the ground there that makes it too dangerous for you to go this year?
Well, I was going to the very same area where Turkey invaded the Kurdish area in the north of Syria, where we have a lot of ministry there. We have lots of people who received Christ, but they are going through very difficult time. With this invasion, we lost contact with many people as they were dispersed and traveled into different regions, whether into Syria or other places.
Nizar, the footage from last Christmas when we featured you is so dire. It's been, you see the worst of conditions, people living in this old abandoned mall and school, and it's terrible. It's worse. The conditions are worse.
In that area, I mean, I've been during the war, throughout the war in Iraq and also in Syria. Literally, you see entire cities, entire towns flat, and those who lived a good life, like you and me and most of our audience.
It would have been recognizable to any Canadian city.
It is not recognizable, but also those like professional people, like doctors, engineers, like hardworking people, business people. you know, they left with nothing. In just overnight, they are with nothing. So when we help them, we say we help with dignity, because these people were professionals.
Okay. But religion, here you go in as a Christian pastor. Religion is a huge problem there. What is the frustration you are hearing?
Well, the frustration is what they have seen from ISIS, who represent Islam. ISIS say, we represent the true image of Islam. So when people saw that image, a lot of people left Islam, especially in these regions, in Iraq and Syria. Not necessarily, you know, all of them came to be Christians, but many became atheists or secular or believing in God, but nothing to do with religion or tradition.
Is the love and peace that Jesus promises that we celebrate this Christmas, is it making a difference to families like that?
That's the only difference, Lorna, because most of the people you can see in their eyes, they lost hope in religion. They lost hope in politics, in governments, so they don't know where to turn. When we show them the love of Jesus, not only in the word, but also in practice, a lot of them, they are, look to Jesus and attracted to the person and to the identity of Jesus. And when we explain about Jesus, many people turn to Jesus. In that region, we started with 7 people. Today we have over 170 people who received Christ. I would have loved to be around this time, but they told me it's almost impossible to be in that area, so we postponed it to April to go into that region.
And this Christmas you'll be celebrating with people in Bethlehem.
In Bethlehem, yes. Also, this is a beautiful place, very special on the heart of God, and yet they are going into another hardships and tough times in a different way. So we are providing a meal and a large meeting, and we are going to also present hope of Jesus, the love of Jesus to the families there.
Pastor Nizar Shaheen, in the hottest spots in the Middle East, thank you for bringing love and peace, we pray.
Thank you so much. And thank you for partnering with Light for All Nations and for all the help that you have given us throughout the years.
Love it, love it. Pastor Nizar Shaheen, thank you for sharing the hope for the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you.
What you heard today is the determination for better government to make better lives. The voices from the Middle East taught us that apathy does not need to take over. It takes courage, one bold person at a time, to be a peace builder, but it is happening in those small pockets. All these courageous workers are posted on our website. Read more about their agencies, get involved, help as you can. All right, context. It tells you how it can be done, where it can be done. For all of us, thanks for joining us. See you again next week.